I got good at making other people sound more certain than they really were. That was most of my job, if I was honest. Somebody from strategy would dump a messy proposal into a shared folder at 6:30. Somebody from leadership would want just a cleaner story before 9 the next morning, and somehow it always ended up with me. I fixed language, reordered slides, cut weak claims, found the point buried under the noise, and handed it back looking like it had always been smart. People thanked me in that distracted way people thank the guy who saves them right before they walk into a room and take credit for being prepared. I stayed late a lot, partly because I was useful there, partly because going home straight from the office usually left me with too much silence. By 10 at night, the whole floor changed character. The glass walls turned black, the city outside became reflections, and the office stopped pretending to be a place built for people. It became what it really was, a machine for polished outcomes. She fit that machine better than anyone. Catherine was one of those women people adjusted themselves around without meaning to. Senior enough that nobody wasted her time, sharp enough that nobody wanted to look sloppy in front of her, composed enough that you almost never got anything for free from her face. In meetings she spoke less than most people, but when she did, everybody else started acting like their earlier comments had just been warm-up. I'd worked under her for almost 2 years, if under was even the right word. Mostly I cleaned up things that landed in her orbit. She knew I was good. I knew she knew. That was usually where it ended. That night I was fixing a deck for a client pitch that had somehow been ruined by 6 different opinions. I had my headphones on, jacket over the back of the chair, tie already loosened, when I noticed someone stop at my desk. I looked up, and there she was, phone in hand. "You still here?" she said. Unfortunately, that got the smallest shift at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. Close enough that I noticed it. She glanced around the empty floor, then at my screen. "Can I borrow your judgment for 10 minutes? On work?" "No." That made me sit back. She turned the phone toward me and set it beside my keyboard. "Tell me what's wrong with this." It was a profile for some high-end matchmaking service. Minimal design, expensive photos, tight little blocks of text. Education, travel, interests, goals. Everything about it looked exactly like I would have expected from her. Precise, impressive, completely sealed. I scrolled a little. She stood beside me with her arms folded, like she was watching numbers come in from a quarterly report. "Well?" she asked. I should have given her the safe answer. Tighten the phrasing. Cut a sentence. Make it warmer. That was what people paid me for, really. Useful edits that didn't disturb the structure. Instead I said, "It sounds like you want to be selected for a board seat." She went still. I kept looking at the screen because it felt easier than looking at her. "It's not bad. That's not the issue. It's just..." I tapped one section with my finger. "This is the version of you that performs well. It tells me you're capable, high-functioning, in demand. It doesn't tell me why anyone would feel close to you." For a second I thought I had crossed a line I wouldn't be able to uncross. Then she pulled the chair from the empty desk beside mine and sat down. "Keep going." So I did. I told her the profile was all outcomes and no texture. All signal, no risk. It answered what she had achieved, where she had been, what standard she lived at. None of it answered how she was when a day went wrong, what made her laugh at the wrong moment, what made her stay, what kind of life actually felt good to her when nobody was watching. It read like she was trying to attract the kind of man who would admire her resume and never ask for anything real. She listened without interrupting. That alone felt strange. Finally she said, very quietly, "You think that's what I'm doing?" I turned to her then. "I think it's what you know how to do." That landed. I saw it land. Not because she looked wounded. She was too controlled for that. But something in her expression changed. Like a door inside her had opened half an inch and she hated that I had noticed. She leaned back in the chair and stared at the phone. "So fix it. I can help rewrite it," I said. "I can't invent a person." A real smile this time, brief and tired. "No. But you can usually tell where one is hiding." We ended up there for almost 2 more hours. I cut lines. She rewrote others. I pushed when something sounded too polished, and once or twice she looked at me like nobody had spoken to her that way in years. Somewhere around midnight, the profile stopped sounding like a high-performing brand and started sounding like an actual woman. Still strong, still selective, but human now, specific, reachable. When she finally stood up, she took her phone and read the new version one last time. "This is better," she said. "It's more dangerous." She looked at me over the screen. Maybe that's the same thing. Then she picked up her coat, thanked me, and walked toward the elevators. I watched her go, then turned back to my slides and realized I wasn't reading a single word on the screen anymore. Because something had shifted, and I knew it had. She had come to my desk asking for help with a profile. That wasn't the part that stayed with me. The part that stayed with me was that for one night, she had stopped managing the room. And I had stopped acting like my only value was making other people present better than they felt. After that, the office didn't look exactly the same. The weird thing was, nothing obvious changed the next day. She was still Catherine in the morning meeting, still controlled, still sharp, still impossible to read if you didn't know what to look for. She asked 2 questions that made half the room realize they had built their recommendation on a weak assumption, then moved on like she hadn't just quietly taken the structure apart. Nobody else noticed anything different. I did. Not because she acted softer. She didn't. It was smaller than that. Once, while someone from accounts was talking too long, her eyes flicked toward me for maybe a second, and there was something there that hadn't been there before. Not warmth exactly. Recognition. After that night, I told myself to leave it alone. That was the smart version of the story. I had helped her with something personal. It had created a strange little pocket of honesty between us, and now both of us would return to our normal positions inside the company and behave like adults. That should have been the end of it. For a few days, it almost was. Then I started noticing when she was leaving the office earlier than usual. Not often, just enough to suggest she was actually using the profile. And once, late Thursday, I saw her come back from one of those dates because she had left a folder in her office. She walked past my desk around 9, heels in one hand, phone in the other, expression flat in a way that told me more than any dramatic reaction could have. She stopped when she saw me. "You're still here again," she said. "You say that like this isn't part of the brand." That got a small exhale from her. She leaned one shoulder against the edge of my desk. "You want the field report?" I looked up from my screen. "That depends. Is it grim?" "Very." I shut the laptop halfway. "Go on." She lifted her phone. He was exactly what the service promised. Educated, polished, successful, traveled constantly. Had strong opinions about wine and architecture and the decline of standards everywhere. She paused. I think if I had stopped breathing across from him, it would have taken him 11 minutes to notice. I laughed before I could stop myself. She did too, briefly, and that alone felt too intimate for an empty office. "The second one was better on paper," she said. "Worse in person." "How?" He had learned how to ask good questions without actually caring about the answers. That one sat between us for a second, because I knew exactly what she meant. You meet enough high-level people, you start to recognize that skill. Attention without presence. Fluency without interest. "So," I said, "the rewrite worked." She looked at me. I nodded toward the phone. "They liked the profile. They just weren't the men for it." Her expression changed at that, just a little. "That's annoyingly close to comforting. I do what I can." She stayed there a moment longer than she needed to, then said, "Are you hungry?" I honestly thought I'd heard her wrong. "Right now?" "Yes. With me." That brought back that look, the one that always made people around her become slightly more careful. "Do you see anyone else here?" We ended up at a narrow place 3 blocks from the office that still served food late and acted like it was doing you a personal favor. No client dinner energy, no polished midtown room built for expense accounts. Just low light, tired staff, and the kind of tables where your knees almost touched if neither of you paid attention. At first we talked about harmless things. The dates, work, the strange vanity of men who described themselves as curated. But once we were out of the building, something kept loosening. She told me she hated how often people mistook discipline for lack of feeling. I told her people mistook helpfulness for lack of ambition. She asked if I had always wanted to do this work, and I gave her the easy answer at first. Pays well. I'm good at it. It happened gradually. She looked at me over her glass and said, "That wasn't the real answer." There it was again. That thing between us. Truth for truth. So I gave her more. I told her that years ago I thought I'd build something of my own. Not just clean up other people's language or rescue their ideas right before presentation time. I wanted to create work with my name on it, not just my fingerprints all over everyone else's. Somewhere along the way, being useful turned into a role, and the role got comfortable enough to live in. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer some neat line about untapped potential. She just listened in a way that made me feel the cost of saying it. "That sounds lonely," she said. "It's efficient," I said. She smiled without amusement. That wasn't the question. We walked after dinner because neither of us was ready to end it. The city had that late-night look where everything feels cleaner from a distance than it does up close. We crossed 2 avenues talking about nothing important, then somehow ended up talking about everything that was. Outside her building, we stopped. There was no confusion left now. Not really. This was past accidental. She looked at me for a long second, coat folded over one arm, hair slightly off from the wind, less arranged than I had ever seen her. "I think," she said slowly, "those dates were useful for one reason." "Which is?" "They made it very hard to pretend I'm only curious about one person." I felt that low and immediate. That's not a small thing to say. "No," she said. "It isn't." Neither of us moved. Then she said good night in a voice that meant the night was not good at all, because now it had an edge to it. She went inside. I stood there another 10 seconds like an idiot, then turned and walked home with my pulse refusing to settle. By the time I got to my apartment, one truth had become impossible to avoid. Whatever this was, it had already started. If you're enjoying my story, show some love with a like and subscribe. For about 2 weeks, we did a very adult and very stupid thing where we kept telling ourselves nothing had fully happened yet. That was the technical truth. We hadn't crossed the line in some dramatic way. No office scandal, no reckless scene, no public moment anybody could point to. But the reality was worse because it was quieter. We had dinners that stretched too long. We had one Saturday coffee that turned into an afternoon and then into her sitting across from me at a small restaurant downtown, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen her. We had messages that were too direct to be casual and too careful to be called what they were. And then, because nothing stays neatly private for long, work started to notice something before there was even anything visible to notice. Not the relationship itself. The possibility of a shift. The fact that she asked for me more often in certain meetings. The fact that when a project got politically sensitive, my name somehow kept coming up closer to the center of it. I'd been doing strong work for years, but in offices like ours, timing always told its own story. A rise was never just a rise. Somebody always wanted to know whose shadow you were standing in. The project was the biggest pitch of the quarter. A full repositioning for a client everyone in leadership wanted to keep. High visibility, weekly executive reviews, the kind of thing that could change who became permanently visible inside the company and who stayed useful in the background forever. I had been in it from the beginning. Not just editing slides this time. Structure, message, strategy, narrative. Real authorship. For the first time in a while, I could feel how much I wanted it. That was probably why it hurt as much as it did. She called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. No warning in her tone, no signal in the message. Just, "Do you have a minute?" I went in with my notebook. She closed the glass door behind me, which she almost never did. Something in my chest tightened. She stayed standing for a second, then moved behind her desk. "I'm reassigning the Franklin work." I stared at her. "Reassigning what part?" "Your part." I actually laughed once because the sentence was too clean to sound real. "That's funny." "It isn't." The room changed temperature. I set the notebook down on the chair across from her desk and didn't sit. "Why?" She held my gaze, and that was the first bad sign. No management phrasing. No vague explanation. Just that calm look that usually meant she had decided something and hated the part where other people still had feelings about it. Because people are watching the wrong things, she said. Because you are too closely associated with me right now. Because if I keep you on the account, every bit of your work will be explained by proximity instead of merit. I felt heat rise so fast it almost made me dizzy. So your solution is to remove me. My solution is to keep this from turning into something uglier. I took a step back from the desk. That's a very elegant way to say exactly the same thing. Her voice sharpened. Don't do that. Do what? Turn this into me pushing you aside for convenience. I looked at her, and for the first time since all this started, I didn't care how controlled she was or how much authority she had in that room. How else exactly am I supposed to experience it? She stood then. As protection. That word did it. I don't know if she realized how wrong it was before she said it, but I did. Immediately. Completely. Protection, I repeated. You mean I do the work, get close to the center, and then right when it matters I'm removed for my own good? That is not what this is. It is exactly what this is. She came around the desk now, not close enough to touch me, just close enough that I could see the strain in the set of her jaw. You think I don't know what this looks like? You think I don't understand the politics here? No, I said. I think you understand them so well that the second something became costly, you made the safe move. Her face changed at that. Not dramatically, but enough, because it was unfair, and because some part of it was true. For a second neither of us said anything. Then she said quieter. I am trying not to let them reduce you. I shook my head. You already did. I picked up the notebook and walked out before she could answer. The next few days were bad in that contained, adult way that almost feels worse than open damage. Nobody openly said I had been pulled. Officially it was a resource shift, coverage adjustment, a capacity call, the usual corporate fiction. But I knew what had happened, and worse, I knew other people would build their own version of it. He got close, then disappeared. Same old story. I kept my distance from her. In meetings, in hallways, in messages. She let me. That somehow made it worse too. 3 nights later she came to my apartment. Not announced. Not planned. I opened the door and she was standing there in a dark coat. Hair pinned back. Expression stripped of almost everything except resolve. You shouldn't be here, I said. I know. I should have sent her away. Instead I stepped aside. She stood in the middle of my living room for a second, taking in the books, the drafts on the table, the half-built pieces of work I rarely showed anyone. Then she looked at me. I was 29, she said. I frowned. What? When I almost got married. That stopped me. She took a slow breath. He was perfect on paper. Same level, same world, same kind of future everyone could understand in one sentence. He was kind in all the approved ways. Ambitious in all the approved ways. We looked right together. My family loved him. My colleagues loved him. I kept waiting to feel more alive inside it. Her mouth tightened. I mostly felt efficient. I stayed quiet. I ended it 6 weeks before the wedding, she said. And ever since then, every time something real starts to matter, I stop trusting my own instinct. I start trusting structures, optics, predictable damage. I tell myself I'm being disciplined when half the time I'm just afraid. There it was. Not polished. Not managed. Just true. I sat down slowly, and after a second she sat too, across from me. My version is less impressive, I said. She watched me. I know how to make other people look bigger than they were already going to look. I know how to rescue, refine, support, sharpen. I know how to be valuable without asking to be central. I let out a breath. What I don't know is how to believe I'm worth choosing once there's a cost attached. Her eyes held mine. That's what this hit, I said. Not just the project. You. Pain moved across her face then, honest and unguarded. I know. No, I said. I don't think you do, because from where I was standing it felt exact. Like the same lesson again. Useful man kept at a safe distance when it matters. She leaned forward. elbows on her knees, her voice low. And from where I was standing, it felt like if I didn't act first, they would come for you anyway. And then everything you built would be explained as mine. We sat there with that for a long moment, both of us partly right, which was the hardest version of all. Finally she said, "I handled it badly." "Yes," I said. "I am still not sorry. I was trying to protect something real." She sidelined me to protect my reputation. Was she right to play it safe? Or was it a betrayal? Tell me what you think in the comments. That line went straight through me because it wasn't a defense. It was a confession. The space between us changed again. Not fixed. Not easy. But honest now in a way that left nowhere to hide. I looked at her for a long second and said, "That only matters if you're actually willing to choose it when the next cost shows up." She didn't answer right away. And somehow that silence told me the real test still hadn't arrived. The next cost showed up faster than either of us wanted. By Monday morning, half the leadership floor knew she was in final discussions for a role in Chicago. Bigger title, bigger team, bigger client portfolio. The kind of move people described with words like inevitable, as if a life could only be measured by whether it kept getting easier to explain at dinner parties. I heard it before she told me herself. That irritated me more than it should have, which was unfair. Nothing about our situation had earned me first access to major career news. Still, when I caught fragments in the kitchen area, massive opportunity, exact right next step, they'd be crazy not to take her. I felt that old instinct rise immediately. Of course, the clean version of the future had arrived right on time. She messaged me just after 6. "Can you come upstairs? Not to my office. Not if you have a minute. Just that." When I got there, the floor was nearly empty. She was standing by the windows with a printed offer letter in one hand, city lights broken across the glass behind her. For a second she looked exactly like the version of her that had first intimidated me. Composed, immaculate, built for rooms that rewarded certainty. Then she turned, and I saw how tired she was. "You heard," she said. "Yes." She looked down at the papers once, then set them on the table between us. "I was going to tell you before it got around. But you didn't." "No," she said. "I didn't." There wasn't much point pretending that didn't matter. So I didn't. I looked at the offer but didn't pick it up. The numbers, the title, the relocation package, the language about strategic influence, it was all exactly what I expected. Prestigious enough to impress everyone. Clean enough to justify itself without effort. "It's a good offer," I said. "It is." I nodded. "That's what makes it dangerous." Her eyes lifted to mine at that. She understood immediately, because the problem was not that the role was bad. The problem was that it was perfect in the same way the wrong things in her life had always been perfect. On paper, from a distance, to people who didn't have to live inside them. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. Even now, even here, I could see her trying not to retreat into control. "Everyone thinks I should take it." "I'm sure they do. And what do you think?" I took a breath before I answered, because this was the moment where a weaker version of me would have tried to sound generous while quietly begging not to be left behind. "I think," I said, "that I'm not going to ask you to stay out of guilt or romance or timing. I'm not going to become the reason you feel smaller than you are." She held still. "But I'm also not doing this version of my life again," I said. "I'm not standing off to the side while someone chooses the polished future and keeps me in the private corner where the real feelings go. Not with you." Something sharp moved across her face. Not anger. Recognition. I kept going because she deserved the whole truth and so did I. "If you take it, then take it because it is honestly the life you want. Not because it looks right. Not because everyone around you knows how to praise it. Not because it saves you from having to choose something messier and more alive." The room went quiet after that. She looked past me, toward the dark glass, and for a second I thought she might do what she had always done best. Organize herself, frame the decision, give it a structure she could survive inside. Instead she said, very softly, "I know exactly what life that move creates." I waited. She smiled once, but there was no relief in it. "A beautiful apartment." Better title. Better story. More admiration. More dinners where everyone says I'm doing incredibly well. Her eyes came back to mine, and me becoming fluent again in a version of myself that can succeed anywhere and still not be reached. That landed hard because it was the clearest I had ever heard her sound. She stepped closer to the table and put one hand on the offer letter, flattening it like she was steadying something already dead. For years, she said, I thought safety meant building a life no one could question. The right man, the right trajectory, the right next move. I got very good at it. She glanced at me. You were the first person who looked at something polished and told me it was hiding the actual problem. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She picked up the offer, looked at it one last time, then folded it once neatly and set it aside. I'm not moving to Chicago, she said. Just like that. No speech. No performance. Just the sentence that mattered. I searched her face, maybe to make sure this wasn't another decision made in fear, just dressed differently. You're sure? Yes. Because of me? Because of me first, she said. And because what's between us is real enough that lying about what I want would cost more than leaving. That was the exact answer I needed. Not flattering. Not reckless. True. Something in me eased then, and something else straightened. Maybe that was the part of the story that belonged to me. Not just that she chose honestly, but that I stopped waiting to be chosen in some half-protected way. I stepped toward her, not carefully this time, and she didn't retreat. You know this still won't be simple, I said. Her mouth moved at the corner. I'm starting to think simple was overrated. I laughed, quiet and helpless, and then I kissed her. There was nothing theatrical in it. No sudden movie ending. Just relief, certainty, and the strange calm that comes when two people stop protecting themselves with the wrong structures at the same time. Later, when we finally left the office, the building looked different to me. Not smaller exactly, just less defining. Less like the place where other people became solid while I stayed useful in the background. She reached for my hand in the elevator like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in a long time, stepping into my own life did too.